She was fired for bringing her son to work until her new boss walked in and said, "I was that kid." "Why is your son here, Brenda? This is a workplace, not a daycare." Letitia's voice cracked through the conference room, drawing every eye to the young woman at the end of the table. She stood tall in her sharp navy suit, arms crossed, eyes unyielding. Brenda clutched Matteo tightly. The little boy, flushed with fever, wheezed softly as he buried his face into her chest. Her blonde hair clung to her cheeks, damp with stress. "I had no one else," she said quietly. "He's sick. I couldn't miss another day." Letitia shook her head. "Comp policy is clear. No children allowed on site. This is unacceptable." Silence fell. Brenda looked around, hoping someone might speak up. Her coworkers avoided her gaze. She swallowed hard. "I just needed to finish my shift, that's all." Letitia's tone was clipped. "You are terminated. Effective immediately." Brenda froze, her breath caught, heart racing. No one moved. No one said a word, just the rustle of papers and the quiet hum of the overhead lights. Letitia turned away, her part done. Brenda hugged Matteo closer, his body hot against hers. Slowly she turned and walked out, legs trembling. The hallway was empty. She pushed through the glass doors and stepped into a gray, drizzling afternoon. Rain tapped softly on the pavement. Brenda pulled off her jacket, wrapping it tightly around Matteo. Her blouse quickly soaked through, clinging to her back. Matteo whimpered. "Mama, I'm cold." "I know, sweetheart," she whispered, kissing his forehead. They descended the steps, passing, people hurrying by with umbrellas, none stopping, none looking. The world kept moving. She felt invisible. Each step was heavier than the last. Her job was gone. Her child was sick. The bills were growing. Her phone was dead. She had no car, no one to call, but she kept walking. At the street corner, she paused. Matteo's breathing was shallow, wheezy. Brenda held him tighter, pressing her cheek to his forehead. "We're going to be okay," she murmured. "Mama's not giving up." The rain fell harder now. Brenda shielded him as best she could, tucking his head under her chin. He coughed again, his tiny hand gripping her necklace. She passed a brightly lit cafe. Warmth glowed from the windows. People inside laughed, dry and safe. Brenda hesitated, then turned away before anyone could see her. She kept moving. In her head, a mantra formed. "I will not give up. I will not give up." She crossed the street, water splashing around her shoes, and ducked under a store awning for a moment's shelter. Matteo stirred slightly, murmuring in his sleep. Brenda looked down at him and brushed the wet curls from his forehead. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise." The rain didn't stop. The wind didn't ease. But she stood there cradling her son, not in despair, but in quiet determination. She had nothing left but him, and for her that was everything. Brenda clutched a stack of resumes worn at the edges, the creases deepening with every rejection. She had walked from one end of town to the other, knocking on doors, speaking with managers, leaving applications at diners, convenience stores, gas stations, even janitorial services. Each conversation ended the same way. Polite smiles that faded once they asked about her last job. The moment the word terminated appeared on her record, the tone shifted. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're looking for someone with a more stable history." HR flags that kind of dismissal. "Nothing we can do. We'll call if something opens up," but never did. By the fourth week, Brenda had pawned her engagement ring, long left in a drawer after Matteo's father disappeared. The money went to food and a single bottle of asthma medication, the cheapest she could find without insurance. It was not enough. One night, as the wind howled outside the shelter of a half-lit gas station restroom, Matteo's breathing turned shallow, rapid. His little chest heaved with each inhale. Brenda crouched beside him, holding the inhaler tightly, whispering, "Just breathe, baby. Please breathe." She counted to 10 with him, trying to keep her voice calm, tears burning behind her eyes. He nodded, trusting her completely. He had no home, no savings, and a child who needed more than love could provide. The gas station attendant, an older woman named Carol with tired eyes, took pity and let them stay in the employees' restroom during the night. It was not much, just a bench, a blanket Carol had pulled from her car, and a flickering fluorescent light, but it was dry and warm enough to keep Mateo safe. During the nights, Brenda cleaned, mopping bathrooms, refilling paper towels, wiping greasy door knobs and trash bins. She worked in silence, her hands raw, knees aching. The smell of ammonia and bleach filled her lungs, but it kept her awake. Every dollar she earned was counted 3 times before she spent it. One evening, she returned to the restroom after her shift. Mateo lay curled under the thin blanket, breathing steady at last. His face was peaceful in sleep, cheeks slightly pink from fever. Brenda sat beside him, smoothing back his hair. She leaned down and kissed his forehead gently, whispering into the darkness, "You did so good today, sweetheart. Mama's proud of you." He stirred slightly, murmuring, "I love you, Mama." Her throat tightened. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 3 a.m. Her shift would start again in less than an hour. She could barely feel her legs, and her arms trembled from exhaustion. Brenda pulled the blanket tighter around him and tucked the inhaler close to his chest. Then she whispered, "Sleep well, my little lion. I'll be right back." She stood quietly, shutting the door behind her. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly as she picked up the mop and bucket. Her body ached, her eyes burned, but her resolve remained steady. She would clean every floor in the city if it meant Mateo could breathe. If it meant he would smile again without a wheeze in his chest. She whispered it to herself like a quiet prayer. "I'll come back. I always come back." Brenda had grown used to the quiet knock on her door each morning. 3 soft raps, a pause, then a gentle voice in Spanish. "Mija, I brought you something." It was Mrs. Maria, her neighbor from down the hall. The older woman had weathered her own storms in life, raising 4 children alone, surviving layoffs, scraping together dignity through sheer will. Brenda had once helped her carry groceries upstairs. Since then, Maria had watched over her like a guardian angel in worn slippers and a headscarf that always smelled of lavender. That morning, Maria handed Brenda a folded flyer. Solix Rivera. It read in bold letters across the top. Now hiring afternoon janitorial staff. No diploma required. Brenda stared at it like it might vanish. "They're a cleaning company," Maria explained. "They take care of office buildings mostly. It is not glamorous, but it is steady." She looked at Mateo, who sat nearby drawing superheroes on scraps of cardboard, "And they are run by our people. Maybe they understand." Brenda clutched the flyer. "Thank you. I'll go right now." The next day, she and Mateo took 2 buses across town. Mateo clung to her hand, his little legs tired before they even arrived. The building that housed Solis Rivera was plain, made of gray brick with a modest lobby that smelled faintly of lemon and floor polish. Brenda signed in at the front desk and was handed a short application. She sat in a plastic chair, balancing the form on her knee, trying not to let her hand shake as she filled out her name, past employment, and the question she dreaded. "Have you ever been terminated from a job?" Her pen hovered over the checkbox for a moment. She checked yes. Mateo coughed beside her, a deep crackling sound that startled a receptionist. Brenda placed her hand on his back and whispered, "SH, it's okay, baby." He leaned against her shoulder, breathing heavy. The inhaler was nearly empty again. At that moment, a man walked through the lobby, deep in thought, holding a set of keys and a phone. He wore dark jeans, a white button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a look that suggested he had not slept much. His hair was graying at the temples, and his eyes, dark and observant, caught on Mateo. He slowed his step. Brenda noticed him glancing their way. For a moment, their eyes met. His gaze flicked to Mateo, then back to her. There was something in his expression, not pity, not judgment, but a flicker of memory, recognition. Then, just as quickly, he nodded politely and moved on. Brenda finished the form with trembling fingers and handed it back. She did not expect to hear from them, but the next afternoon, her phone buzzed. "Miss Lopez, This is Elena from Salonis Rivera. We'd like to offer you a part-time custodial position on the afternoon shift. You'd start tomorrow. Brenda's mouth fell open. Wait, really? Yes. And we understand you may need to bring your child. There is a break room available as long as he stays safe and out of the work zones. Brenda could barely speak. Thank you. Thank you so much. She hung up and pulled Mateo into her lap. We got it, baby. Mama's working again. The next day, Brenda stepped into the company's modest headquarters with her son beside her. The staff was kind, many of them immigrants like her, speaking a blend of English and Spanish. Elena, the supervisor, showed her where the supplies were stored and pointed out the employee break room, a small space with a couch, a mini fridge, and an old TV that still played DVDs. Mateo sat quietly on the couch, sketchbook in hand, while Brenda got to work. She scrubbed floors, emptied trash, and wiped glass doors. It was hard physical work, but she was grateful for every second. At one point during her shift, Brenda glanced through the glass window into the hallway and saw the man from the lobby again, Bruce Rivera. He paused briefly when he saw her working, then gave a small nod, one of acknowledgement rather than superiority. She nodded back, unsure of who he truly was. But in that moment, she felt something shift. A door had opened, and this time she was walking through it. Every afternoon, Brenda slipped on her gloves and got to work. She scrubbed restrooms, sinks, until they shone, mopped scuffed tile floors and wiped smudges off glass doors until her reflection stared back clearly. She did not complain. She did not pause. Even when her back ached and her hands stung from cleaning agents, Brenda carried on because just down the hall in a small break room with a worn couch and faded walls, her son was safe. Mateo stayed curled up with his sketchbook, crayons worn down to stubs, drawing stick-figured heroes and crooked hearts. Brenda checked on him every hour. She would rush in, crouch down, and wipe the sweat from his brow with the corner of her sleeve, even if it still smelled of ammonia and bleach. You okay, baby? She whispered each time. Mateo always nodded, too tired to speak. But his eyes always searched hers for reassurance, and she gave it quietly with a soft kiss on his forehead and a hand brushing back his curls. It was a rhythm they learned together. Brenda cleaned, Mateo rested, and the hours ticked by like fragile promises. One Wednesday afternoon, something changed. Brenda walked into the break room to check on her son, as usual, and stopped in the doorway. Mateo was sitting up, eyes wide, hands frozen above a small table. Spread out before him was a neat array of treasures, a brand new box of colored pencils, 2 thick comic books, and a small stuffed lion with soft fur and a crooked smile. He looked up at her. Mama, where did this come from? Brenda stepped closer, her breath catching. I don't know. She picked up the box of pencils, flipping it over as if some explanation would be printed on the back. Nothing. She opened one of the comic books, still crisp, still smelling of new paper. Her fingers trembled slightly as she placed it back down. Mateo's eyes sparkled with the kind of joy she had not seen in weeks. Can I keep them? He asked quietly. Brenda nodded, too stunned to speak. Yes, baby, of course. Later during break, she asked the others, did someone leave these in the break room for my son? Heads shook. Everyone seemed just as surprised. Elena, her supervisor, shrugged. Maybe it was one of the office staff. I don't know. But it's sweet, isn't it? Brenda smiled and murmured a thank you to no one in particular, but in her heart, a quiet warmth bloomed. Down the hallway behind a slightly ajar office door, Bruce Rivera stood still. He had passed by the break room just moments earlier, unseen, and watched as Mateo reached for the pencils with trembling hands. He had watched the boy's eyes light up the same way his own used to when his mother brought him a sandwich he had saved from a guest's leftovers. He remembered what it was like to be the child in the corner, ignored, unseen, until someone chose to notice. He had not meant to stand there as long as he did. But when he saw Brenda kneel beside her son, eyes shimmering with emotion, something in his chest pulled taut. He gripped the edge of the door frame, jaw tight. There were few memories in his life more painful than watching his mother scrub hotel floors at midnight with no one to help her. And few were still more sacred than remembering the one time someone left him a toy on Christmas Eve, a gesture so small it had shaped his entire understanding of kindness. He had not planned to intervene, but this was different. That night, Brenda sat beside Mateo as he drew with his new pencils. He colored a superhero with curly hair and a lion by his side. Brenda leaned her head against the back of the couch and smiled softly. "Someone's watching over us," she whispered. Mateo looked up like a guardian angel. Brenda nodded. "Maybe." Down the hall, Bruce returned to his desk and stared at the closed door for a long time. Sometimes the smallest things made the biggest difference, and sometimes it started with a box of colored pencils. The supply closet was dimly lit, its air thick with the scent of cleaning chemicals and old cardboard. Brenda knelt on the linoleum floor, her knees pressed against the cold tile, one hand clutching a damp rag. Mateo lay nearby on a folded towel, his face pale, eyes glazed with fever. To make him smile, Brenda twisted the rag into the shape of a puppet, wiggling it back and forth in front of him. "Look, Mateo. Senior Sock is here to rescue the day," she said in a funny voice, letting out a squeaky laugh. She danced the makeshift puppet across his blanket, making exaggerated voices and silly movements. Mateo giggled softly, his breath raspy, but his smile bloomed across his tired face. Through the crack in the closet door, Bruce stood motionless. He had come down to check on a shipment, but stopped when he heard laughter. Small wheezing, but real. What he saw paralyzed him. Brenda, kneeling there with sweat on her brow and stains on her uniform, looked exhausted, but she was smiling. She was making her son laugh in the middle of a utility closet, using nothing but a dirty rag in her heart. Bruce stepped back quietly and returned to his office. He sat down slowly behind his desk, stared at the ceiling and rubbed his eyes. But it was not fatigue that burned them. It was memory. He saw his mother again decades ago in the back of a cheap motel where she worked as a night cleaner. He was 5, feverish and scared. She had no toys, no medicine, nothing but 2 mismatched socks she turned into dancing puppets. They made him laugh then too, just like Mateo. And just like Mateo, he had no idea how tired she must have been. 3 days later, the skies opened with a vengeance. The rain fell in thick sheets, flooding gutters and washing over the parking lot of the Rivera building. It was nearly 7 p.m. and most of the staff had gone home. Brenda exited the side door, holding Mateo tight against her chest, his head buried in her jacket. She had no umbrella, only a fraying coat she wrapped around them both, shielding him from the wind and rain. As she stepped into the downpour, a shadow moved beside her. A large, dark umbrella opened above them. Brenda turned in surprise. Bruce stood next to her, silent, steady. Rain pelted around them, but under the umbrella it was quiet, almost sacred. For a long moment, he said nothing, just walked beside her across the slick asphalt. Mateo peeked out from her jacket, eyes wide. When they reached the edge of the lot, Bruce stopped. He handed her the umbrella. "No one who tries that hard to do the right thing deserves to walk in the rain," he said softly. Then he turned and walked back toward the building without waiting for thanks. Brenda stood there, umbrella in one hand, her son in the other, stunned into silence. From that day on, something shifted. She started to notice him more. How he always arrived early. How he asked employees about their families. How he lingered for a moment outside the break room as if checking that Mateo was okay. He never asked for recognition. In fact, he seemed uncomfortable with it. Brenda began to understand him in ways she could not explain. A week later, Mateo entered the main office with a folded piece of paper. Brenda had asked him to wait in the break room, but he had wandered off with quiet determination. Bruce was at his desk reviewing invoices when the boy appeared. "This is for you," Mateo said, holding out the paper. Bruce took it and unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing. A tall man with an umbrella stood over a woman and child in the rain. A smile stretched across the child's face. Above it, Mateo had written in block letters, "Thank you, Mr. Bruce. You're like a quiet superhero." Bruce's throat tightened. He looked at the boy, who simply shrugged and said, "Mama says people like you save the day without making noise." He reached out and gently ruffled Mateo's hair. "I'll keep it safe," Bruce said, his voice. And he did. He taped it to the inside of his office cabinet. That night, he placed a small labeled inhaler inside Brenda's locker. There was a note for the breaths that matter most. He also called Elena, the supervisor, and arranged to cover the cost of Brenda and Mateo's lunch for the rest of the month, anonymously. Of course, he was not trying to be a hero. He was just trying to repay a kindness once given to him long ago by a woman who had nothing but never let him feel it, just like Brenda. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Bruce walked into the break room holding a small paper bag. "I thought Mateo might like these," he said, placing the bag gently on the table. Brenda looked up from where she was wiping down the counter. "More cookies?" she asked with a playful smile. Brushha said he likes the ones with the chocolate chips and caramel. "I figured I'd try to get it right this time." Mateo peeked into the bag and lit up. "Mama, they're still warm." Brenda watched as Bruce sat beside her son and listened to him chatter about his drawings, his favorite superhero powers, and the comic book he was trying to write. Bruce smiled, nodded, even laughed when Mateo said he wanted to be a super cleaner like his mom. When Mateo ran off to the corner to draw, Brenda found herself watching Bruce more closely. "I've always wondered," she said softly. "Why do you care so much about us?" Bruce looked at her, the amusement in his eyes fading just a little, his smile thinned. He was quiet for a moment before replying. "Because I was Mateo," he said. "And my mom, she was a Brenda. Strong, stubborn, tired all the time, but she never gave up." Brenda blinked, surprised by the honesty, the weight behind his words. He continued, eyes distant. "She used to sneak me into hotel closets while she cleaned night shifts. I remember sleeping on towels, hearing her hum lullabies while she scrubbed floors." Brenda didn't speak. For the first time, she saw Bruce not just as the man who quietly helped them, but as someone shaped by the same kind of pain, someone who had learned empathy through survival. In that moment, the air between them shifted. The boundaries blurred. A few days later, the company held its annual anniversary celebration. Folding chairs lined the warehouse floor. A small stage at the front decorated with balloons in Rivera blue and white. Employees gathered, laughing, eating cake, chatting in English and Spanish. Brenda stood in the back, wearing her cleanest uniform, Mateo beside her, and a slightly too big button-up shirt that Maria had ironed for the occasion. When Bruce stepped onto the stage, the room quieted. "Thank you all for being here," he began. Solutions RIA was built by people who understand struggle, who know what it means to work hard with little and to dream despite it. He looked out over the crowd. His gaze landed on Brenda. "I want to tell you a story," he said. "When I was a child, my mother was a janitor. She worked nights scrubbing floors in silence, hiding me in utility closets because we could not afford childcare. She never complained, never asked for help, and no one ever offered it. The room was still, the air thick with emotion. A few weeks ago, I saw a young mother doing the same thing," Bruce continued. "Tired, overworked, and loving her son with every breath she had left. I saw her and I remembered." He paused, swallowing hard. "I am proud to work alongside someone like Brenda Lopez. Her strength, her grace, her commitment. She is everything this company stands for." There was a beat of stunned silence before the applause erupted. Loud, lasting. And so, Bruce added, raising his voice just slightly, "It is my honor to officially promote Brenda to supervising custodian, effective immediately." Brenda's mouth opened slightly, her breath catching. And he said, turning toward Mateo, "Salunias Rivera will be providing a full education scholarship for Mateo Lopez through high school and into college if he chooses, because no child should carry the weight of their parents' struggle alone." The crowd was on their feet, clapping, some wiping away tears. Brenda's legs threatened to give way beneath her. She felt Mateo's hand slip into hers. She wasn't crying for the promotion or the scholarship or even the recognition. She was crying because for the first time in a long, long time, she did not feel alone. Bruce stepped off the stage and walked straight toward her. He did not say anything, just looked at her, eyes soft, a quiet question in his expression. She nodded, unable to speak, and he smiled. Because sometimes the loudest words are the ones left unspoken. And sometimes the most powerful victories come not from climbing, but from holding someone else steady until they can stand on their own. Brenda adjusted the collar of her crisp white shirt, checking the name tag pinned just above her heart. It read Brenda Lopez, supervisor. The first time she saw it, she nearly cried. Now she wore it with quiet pride. Her morning started earlier, her voice firmer when she greeted the cleaning teams, her steps more confident as she walked the halls. She still worked hard, harder, maybe, but there was a difference now. She felt seen. She felt heard, and she held her head just a little higher. Mateo's life changed, too. His new school had a real library, one with bean bags and shelves full of superhero books. The teachers knew his name by the second day. They greeted him at the door, asked about his drawings, encouraged his stories. He started smiling more, laughing louder, breathing easier. Some days Brenda would find Bruce in the break room after his meetings, sitting across from Mateo at the little table, a chessboard between them. Bruce was not very good and he knew it, but Mateo always giggled when he caught him making a clumsy move. Other times, Bruce would bring a new comic book, pretending it was just lying around his office. Mateo would leap into his arms with unfiltered joy. Brenda would watch from the hallway, her arms crossed over her chest, smiling despite herself. She and Bruce never talked about what was happening between them, but the air was different now. When they passed in the hall, his eyes lingered a little longer. When he asked how her day was, the question always carried weight. And when she answered, he truly listened. They moved in slow, unspoken steps. Two people, not rushing towards something new, but quietly healing from something old. One Thursday evening, the rain came fast and hard. Thunder echoed off the building walls as lightning lit up the sky. Brenda stayed late, catching up on reports and helping a new team member get oriented. By the time she clocked out, the hallways were dark and silent. She walked toward the exit, Mateo already waiting with Elena in the break room. But something caught her eye just outside Bruce's office. On the floor was a neatly folded raincoat, brand new, deep blue with a hood. Next to it sat a small takeout container, steam still curling from the edges. A simple note lay on top, written in strong, clean handwriting. "Thank you for not giving up." Brenda stood frozen for a moment. She picked up the note, fingers brushing over the words. The scent of warm rice and grilled chicken drifted up from the container. Her throat tightened. She slowly turned her head and saw him. Bruce was standing at the far end of the hallway, leaning slightly against the door frame. He did not move toward her. He did not say a word. He simply nodded once, a soft smile tugging at his lips. And in that single look, Brenda felt everything. Gratitude. Yes, but also admiration, care, something more than kindness. She clutched the raincoat to her chest. In that silent, rain-soaked moment, she knew what they had was no longer just about a second chance. It was the start of something neither of them had dared to believe in again. Something that began not with fireworks, but with small, steady gestures and a note that said more than any grand speech ever could. The rooftop was quiet. High above the city's gentle Sunday hum, the late afternoon sun spilled across the concrete in golden streaks. A soft breeze stirred the corners of Brenda's blouse as she stepped out onto the terrace, the door clicking shut behind her. She squinted slightly against the light, and there he was. Bruce stood near the edge, hands in his pockets, gaze cast over the horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, like the world had decided to slow down just for them. She walked toward him, her footsteps light but steady. "You said it was important," she said softly. He turned, that familiar smile tugging at his lips, the one that always felt like a secret between them. "It is," he replied. For a moment, they simply stood there, two people shaped by storms, now meeting in the calm. Bruce reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. No velvet, no ceremony, just simplicity. He opened it and revealed a silver bracelet, thin, elegant, understated. On the inside, one word was engraved in small, clear letters. "Always." I am not proposing, he said gently, eyes never leaving hers. I do not have a speech or a plan or anything fancy to offer. He stepped closer. I just want to say this. He held out the bracelet, his voice quiet but unwavering. I cannot promise forever. I cannot promise easy, but I can promise this. I will always be someone you and Mateo can lean on. Whenever you need me, however you need me, even if it's just to sit beside you and listen. Brenda looked down at the bracelet in his hand, then up at the man offering it. Not a knight, not a savior, but something more rare, someone real. She did not speak right away. Instead, she reached out, took the bracelet, and held it gently. Then, with the faintest smile, she looked back at Bruce and stepped forward. Her arms wrapped around him, firm and certain. Not because she needed rescuing, but because someone finally stood beside her and saw her not as a burden, not as a symbol, but as a person worth choosing. She rested her head against his chest. Thank you, she whispered. Bruce closed his eyes and held her close, the city stretching below, the sky turning softer with each passing second. A sudden shout broke the stillness. Mama! Mateo came bounding onto the rooftop, cheeks pink from running, hair sled by the wind. He skidded to a stop when he saw them embracing, and his face broke into a grin. You're smiling, Mama, he said breathlessly, eyes wide. You look like a superhero now. Brenda laughed, a clear, bright sound that echoed gently in the quiet air. She opened one arm, and Mateo ran into it without hesitation. Bruce knelt beside them, pulling the boy into the circle of warmth. The three of them huddled together, the sunset draping its golden light over their shoulders like a soft blanket. No wedding, no grand declaration, just the kind of love that grows quietly like a seed planted in the dark and watered with hope. They stood there for a long while watching the world below. They did not need to say anything else because sometimes family is not defined by blood or vows. Sometimes it is simply the people who stay, who see the worst parts of you and choose to stay anyway. And in the glow of that fading sun with a bracelet that said always, a boy who finally felt safe and two hearts finally steady, Brenda realized something. She did not need a perfect ending. She just needed this moment, and it was more than enough. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the quiet strength in love, or simply made you believe in kindness again, we hope you'll carry its message with you. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not the loudest. They are the ones that whisper gently. You are not alone. If you want more stories like this, tales of resilience, compassion, and unexpected connections that restore your faith in humanity, please subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Let us walk with you one story at a time. Hit that subscribe button. Your next heartwarming journey begins here. Music.